Those of you joining us online, we just did our quick round of introductions. We saw Tom Sutton, Lindsay Balanchi, Jimmy Collier, Marta Stegman, and Faye Almashar. Thank you guys so much for joining us. So we're going to dive into a couple of questions. We've curated a little bit of this, but most of those folks coming here are probably entrepreneurs who are thinking about starting entrepreneurial endeavor. So the first question, and I actually want to extend this. Not all the questions will necessarily go to all the panelists, but this one I do want to go. I want to go to all the panelists. Is why did you decide to start your own business and lean out of a corporate world and go into being an entrepreneurial world?
So my entrepreneurial path started completely by accident. I was working my big girl job at a law firm doing business litigation and business bankruptcy. And my co-founder with Sin City Cupcakes, Danielle, she and I met the modeling industry. I modeled all her college and law school. So we met the modeling industry, we're just friends. Fast forward, working my big girl job, and she was like, so I'm starting to make alcohol cupcakes. And I was like, that's genius, love it. And she was doing it in Florida, and I was like, you have to come to Vegas. And I made all the mistakes she made from the beginning as a founder, right? I was working as an attorney. I just bought a house. It was like 2011. I got like pennies on the dollar. And I was like, move into my house. I just bought this big giant house. I'm like, move in. I'll help you start the company, and it'll be amazing. And that's exactly what we did. And so, yeah, it was just so much alcohol cupcakes in Vegas. Like, this is the place to overspend, to overindulge, buy things we're not going to buy do at home. I was like, we're going to crush it. And so we made $1 million over 18 months of the company. I was still working full time at the firm. So I worked 5.5 days a week as an attorney. At night and weekends, I was baking, I was running deliveries, I was running events, I was doing all the things, right? Because that's what you do when you're a founder. You wear 8 million hats. And I was still working a full-time job. And I'm so grateful that I did it that way because, one, I had a safety net of income coming in. Because as you know, when you start a company, there is no money coming in, right? And so you need to be able to pay for those expenses. And we totally bootstrapped it. We started it out of my kitchen, right? And I quickly realized the health department was going to come with that. We went to a shared kitchen and really just slowly scaled from there in relation to the operations side. And it was truly Danielle. Like, Danielle took care of like the kind of 9 to 5 hours, answering phones, taking care of deliveries and stuff that was going on during the day. And then literally at night, we were baking together, we were setting up events together. It was just such a whirlwind. It was so much fun. And I'm really grateful that I had that experience to do it that way. So now I realize I would not do it again. But I'm grateful I had that experience because you need to go through the gauntlet if you're a founder. And that's definitely as an investor, that's what I want to hear as well, right? I want to know that you as a founder are putting everything that you can into it because it'll last. And to this day, it's still around, and now we're in the middle of the private M&A discussions with a national bakery. So
there is, even though it's a completely different product, there's so much that rings true about what we just said in so many ways. The late nights, the craziness, the feeling like you're ready to frenzied, but all of the wonderful things that are out of that. So Marta and I started this company. I will let you tell the longer story of the start, but we met on a cannabis farm where I used to be an architect, so I was doing facility builds there for sustainable housing. Marta was doing yield optimization in terms of large scale grows, outdoor grows for the medical cannabis. We both recognized that there was a sort of niche that needed to be filled in that a lot of our colleagues who had expertise, who had real skill in the industry, were using outdated methods and not only movement and transport, but in terms of retail space of how they were actually getting products to customers in a purely legal market, and they were facing sort of backlash around not just at a state level, but an onerous and sort of burdensome regulations, but on a federal level as well. And we looked at this and thought, like, there is a way in which we can kind of use our design backgrounds to be able to address this in a way that feels as though it could be scalable. And so we're in Vegas, the company has begun, and there is so much there that was, we started in California that was just all about exactly what you spoke about, so, which is just incredible amounts of effort catching up to what we didn't know, not knowing what we didn't know, and really, everything from, Excel classes to understanding our financial statements to, understanding what does marketing look like in this market for cannabis versus in California versus Nevada. How do we read through 1,000 pages of state regulations and then really be able to summarize that in 2 pages and then send that out to potential investment, things like that. So there was just, a lot of time and effort and struggle, and it feels like we're finally kind of getting that traction that is a representation of the knowledge that we gained and what we've learned, and how we're putting that out there in the world. And so that's really exciting. So I think we're a couple steps behind where you guys have been, but it is definitely sort of in that exciting arch upward right now. So yeah,
That's awesome.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, how do I follow up that? First of all, I did the exact opposite of you and kind of just jumped in without any parachute. So I've got 15 years of big tech experience and startup experience, building teams and working with talent and people operations and hiring from ground level to, Series A, Series B. And I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. My mother can probably tell you this. I was selling scrunchies for $1 a scrunchie. Actually, my little brothers and sisters were selling scrunchies door to door in 1992. I would sew the scrunchies and then I would sell them. Who knew scrunchies came back? Actually, that's none of that. I knew they'd be cool again. Anyway, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I didn't quite fit that corporate, 9 to 5. You've got to fit into this mold. And I struggled with that for many years because I was like, man, I'm thinking out of the box and I'm doing all these things and come into COVID and I was working for Halo at the end of 2021 and I realized there was something more for me and that's a bigger story. But into 2022, I said, how do I make an impact how do we use technology for the everyday average person instead of it being big tech versus us? And so I took a step back and said, how do I make an impact? I know I want to start a company. I've got to feel really, it's got to be a full heck yeah on that. And went through the process, has just volunteered my time in Web3 and Metaverse with Tech Alley and start like the community here. And out of that, just asked myself over and over again what I wanted to do, knowing that I didn't want to go back to big tech and corporate and instead of just helping startups get, in addition to, I also wanted to showcase that. And so my whole thing was plants and it's always been plants. And so I said, how do I just create something that we can feed and do that? But knowing that I was surrounded by an incredible ecosystem and community here in Las Vegas gave me the courage to be like, let's jump off, because I didn't have a plan or a ton of savings. I just was like, you know what, we're doing it now. We're doing it now. So here we are. We'll see how it goes. Stay tuned.
So many of these little anecdotal stories makes me think that there probably is a character of the entrepreneurial mindset. So I spent time right before this kind of journey really launched. My last corporate job was working in regulatory oversight for a firm that does proxy research for SEC companies that are publicly traded that have shareholder corporate responsibility provisions that are important to understand. I was able to take that experience and segue it into my meta grasp on the cannabis industry regulations and look at how I thought that they would change over the next decade, and look at, like Lindsay mentioned, the people that were actively working in the space towards those changes and who was positioned to take from 2016, we first met in California, to the next 10, 15 years, how those competencies would have to change based on a regulatory landscape and also on a technology landscape. And so, all these conditions, people have different ways of thinking about things. Lindsay and I had both coincidentally gone to art school. And for us to have this software company at this point, a lot of times people ask us, how do you guys have, neither one of you are technical founders. Where's your dev team, et cetera, et cetera. And really our competency has come around being the product managers of this. And if you're where we've had where macro, the Silicon Valley funding funnel has largely been kind of
talked about in a way that's Silicon Valley. It sounds very exclusive to technology, but it's about creativity. And so even without understanding, now we know a lot more about what we didn't used to know when we started this. But if you approach things from a creative space, and rather than what the expectation of that industry that it's in, a lot of time we're doing drop down on a forum. What exact industry sector are you in? But I think we're in creative design challenge space. I think that's what everyone's doing here, and you have to work on regulations, a funding criteria, a market adoption rate. It's about people, places, timing. So I think really aligning those things, but knowing for the cute period for these three women is there's a gumption factor. So, you know, there's a lot of moments in this journey. We're really proud, and happy now. There's been hard moments. I think Lindsay and I just had to both definitely give it our all 100%. Like Lisa said, after you get home from your regular job, as long as you know you can get your startup off the ground, if you stop sleeping and have a co-founder that you can live with and spend those sleep hours working on the concept, you can probably do it. But it's a gumption thing, and a lot of people don't want to give up everything. But if you do and you're creative, I think it doesn't. There's so much fostering, and we're in a space right now, all this connectivity and things. I heard earlier in the networking section, someone say, this trouble we all hear, but I really agree. Like, it's really not the ideas. The ideas are shared, collaborative, maybe the coalesce. It's executing them and finding the team to execute them. And so that's why it has been magic for us.
Yeah, I think there's so many patterns in a lot of the stories, and I think for mine, I resonate with a lot of stories in the sense of like seeing a problem and just wanting to get started. Like, I think that's a lot of mental block what a lot of people face is they don't realize they can just get started. Like, you can, why not? You don't, oh, well, it's regulated. Okay, start a website. How many people go on the website? A lot? Okay, maybe you should start the company. Like, so I think a lot of it is just that mindset of like, I think, I don't know about you guys, but I think part of it is ignorance. Like, when I jumped in, I had no idea. I feel like I've seen that there.
Yeah.
It's so easy. Right? Yeah. And so I had this like example, like my first internship ever was at LVMH. So Louis Vuitton sounds very glamorous. Like, oh my God, I was so excited. It was an unpaid internship. They should change that. And I hated it. I was like, wow, I'm just like a number to this company, this massive conglomerate. They're like, the CEO is now the richest person in the world. I'm nothing. And so the next internship I had was at a startup, and I was like, holy shit, they're letting me do way more than I should be doing right here. And I absolutely love that. And so my entrepreneurship journey starts after the startup. And I usually don't share this story, but since this is a panel of women, I actually realized, and I think a lot of you guys will find it relevant. So I said I'm an immigrant. I'm from a very conservative Muslim country where women don't necessarily work. And so I left to get an education here and to work here. And I worked at that startup, and I was so excited. And I lost my visa because I don't know if you guys know, it's a lottery business. So I lost the lottery twice. You're only supposed to do it once. And I had to go back to my country. And that kind of sucks after living in the States, right? After like seeing like all the freedoms that are here and like what I can accomplish. And so I was back in that country, and something amazing happened. I wasn't really excited to go back, but I got excited when I was there because the year before I left, women got the right to vote. And so in the 7 years that I was away, women started entering the workforce in mass. And so all of a sudden there was all these challenges that had to be solved, right? And as somebody that worked at a startup, I was like, holy shit, I can do this. I can fix these problems. And the problem that I chose to fix is that for conservative countries, women cover up, right? So when they're home, they wear all black, the burqas, if you guys know. But now if they're in the workplace, they need professional clothing. And there wasn't really professional clothing that was conservative, right? They can't like show their shoulders, they can't show their elbows. It's like certain rules that you have to follow. It has to be baggier, fit, etc. And so I realized there was two options that they could go for. There was the like Louis Vuitton, Gucci, because they also had money. And then there was like the H&M and Forever 21, which wasn't really professional. And so I launched a business for professional women's clothing that was conservative and yet still fun and fresh and young. And it went awesome. And so I was just blown away that like, just this dumb idea. I remember ordering my first collection. I was, didn't get any of the licenses or anything. I was like, let's just sell this on Instagram. And then it took off. And then I was like, okay, let's get legitimate now, right? So it's that testing and like figuring out that there is product market fit and I can do this. Sorry.
Yeah, that's really answered. Touched on it. We'll do one more round of random answer this question. We'll dive into it. And a few a specific question takes for a few of you based on your areas of experience. But one more, I'd like the whole group to talk to just going down the line is and you guys touched on it already, what is the hardest part and then what is the best part about being an entrepreneur? I think that founders, when people are talking about their experience, the best part of being an entrepreneur is not always the most educational, but it's always the most motivating. So I want to touch base on what is the worst part, the hardest part of being an entrepreneur, and then what is the best part?
For me, the hardest part was just realizing that you're not gonna be able to have it all at the same time. There's going to be elements of your life that are so out of balance because you're pouring so much into what you're building. So that means you're going to sacrifice family time, you're going to sacrifice time with your friends, you're going to sacrifice girl trips, you're going to sacrifice personal relationships. All of those will come at a cost of you being so obsessed with what you're doing and what you're building. And hopefully it ends up working out that you decided that sacrifices were worth it for you. Oh, and sorry, and the best part, right?
Yes.
That's part, it's just like the freedom and the flexibility that comes with it, right? So I realized through my experience of starting Cincinnati Cupcakes, oh my gosh, I can have my own company as long as I team up with an operational partner. And that's exactly what I did. And I kept taking that same model over and over and over. So now I own a Warren Brokers real estate brokerage, I own shipping stores, I own e-commerce brands. Like there's so much that you can do if you say, hey, like here's certain areas that I'm really good at. I need to find operators that I can partner with that know more about this. And even if they don't know about it, if they're willing to learn. So when we started Cincinnati Cupcakes, I didn't know how to bake. I wasn't a baker. I wasn't passionate about baking. Cupcakes wasn't my thing. I was just like, that's a really good idea. And like, someone's going to pay a lot of money. So I'll have alcohol cookies at their bachelorette party, right? And so it was just that idea. And like, same with real estate, right? That's a long-term play. Like as an investor, it's a long-term play with the shipping stores. I didn't know anything about shipping. I've never worked in a UPS store, but I liked the business model. And I was like, this is a low maintenance, low overhead thing. Mailboxes are mini storage unit. Why don't I have 1,000 of these? Like, find an operator who will do that journey with you, and you guys can learn it together, and then all of a sudden you have it. So that's the best thing about entrepreneurship.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I would say there's a million hard things, there's a million great things. Everyone here is hungry, never gonna sleep, wonderful things. You get to be a product of marketplace, all that. I think for me, the hardest and the best thing are kind of the same, which is the navigating the relationships. Like it is, you're being thrown into not thrown into, you are actively choosing to step into a place and time that is completely foreign to maybe what you did before. It doesn't have to be, like you're obviously going to come a lot of people with expertise in what they've done before, but there is ways in which you're going to try to move through the world that are going to be completely different than anything you did before. And any experience you've had, any job you've had, anything like that, it's in many ways help you, but there's not going to be an answer for everything. And it's coming down to those relationships, not only with your co-founder, but with, your mentors, your investors, your, people, your employees you eventually hire, all of these things that you're going to sort of move into, your clients, your customers, all of that. That is probably the hardest to balance those. It's sort of exactly what you're saying, but then that's also the best thing that comes out of it. When you are suddenly having those relationships with people that this company is forming, you're out there, you've got clients, you've got customers, and you are starting to see an impact on the world, and not in like an ego-driven way of like, this is what I made, look at it, but like more of this is relationship, something new that is built. There are ways in which you have created something wonderful that's burgeoning and interesting and cool, and you're obsessed with it, and then you're putting it out there, and those relationships that you build with all those people would never happen had you not, started this or taken the risk or jumped off the edge of the pool or something. So I think it's the hardest point and the best point. So, yeah. Yeah.
For me, the hardest point has been the loneliness factor, to be honest, that we don't really talk about. It's hard for people to understand, maybe in this room, you guys probably get it because we're all maybe doing the same thing. However, outside, when you leave something like Microsoft and say, hey, I'm jumping off without a safety net, et cetera, it can be isolating. And we have to also account for the loneliness factor of entrepreneurs who are like, I'm grinding, and I've got to say yes, or I've got to say no to these things. And your friends are like, but why? I don't understand. And they're trying to talk you out of it. And it's like, the hardest part for me has been learning to block and to really, with gracious love and empathy, and saying, hey, I really can't hear this right now because I've got to do the thing. But it also feels very lonely. And so the best part, I think, about entrepreneurship, and you touched on it as well, was the freedom to wake up every day knowing that I get to create whatever I want. And I chose this because this was what my 8-year-old self said, I get to do it. And so I think in that, when we're free enough to say, I get to wake up every day and create the change that I want to see in the world. And that is my calling. I can't do anything else. That's the most rewarding part. But the hardest part can be the loneliness and feeling like no one else understands this. And then when you're in a room of people who are going through the same journey, you feel a little less alone, for sure.
Yeah, it's, Lindsay and I learned this word, or this phrase, I think probably 2 years in, and it's called trough of sorrows. And I don't remember what we're talking about right here. It's a startup journey.
Like short stories.
It's a trough where you maybe have these times where you have a good call and you're trying to do a really
Disruptive technology probably, and so it's the sine wave. It's not that there's a lot of space in between the waves, and it feels like a trough, and sometimes it feels like you're crawling out of it. Oh, we're on the up and up. Everything's, excuse me, it's all in the effort to get the product market fit, and so that's the first thing. Learning the vocabulary to deal with these things that is like a loneliness. Like for me, the relationship change, people change, etc. But like, there's a special kind of loneliness of when everyone around you says like, why are you obsessed with your product? They don't know what product market fit is because they're like your side pedestrian friend who isn't in the startup space. But they're like, why are you obsessed with this? Like, it's not even working yet. That's because we're still in the traffic startup. It's getting the product market fit, because I'm just so grateful every day that if you have a team and you build and you have that gumption or the perseverance and you've made the decision so you're going to responsibly give it your all, then that's why the tropic star got made, because you can get out of it. And then you get to this amazing thing called product market fit, which if you're building something that's never, Lindsay and I set out to make self-checkout machines for cannabis. So a lot of people thought, why do you need that? Oh my gosh, we could just have them go to the cashier, or is this necessary? Such sensible. But it's not. That's why they were able to do it at Walmart. Well, all it takes is time. Nothing good comes easy. And so if you can remember all of that, it correlates to how wide is that trough. And then I even, there'll be moments where you think, I thought we were out of the trough. We're back in the trough. The trough could actually be 4-dimensional. Who knows? But when you actually know that the product market fit thing is happening, and we were told about this kind of like wave of adoption or traction that we would start to feel even before like a mass revenue adoption, even in the pre-traction way, as our sales funnel is long. So to sell an electronic checkout system to retail is just something that takes, even at a big box retail store far away from cannabis, about a 6-month deal. There's 8 months, 18 months to try to switch over their systems to change the way that people transact anything. And so in cannabis, our sales funnels are adjacently protracted. But once we want, the best thing about it is when your team believes it's gonna happen, and that shift where we always believe you're getting out of the trough. But once you have enough validation from that product market fit hurdle, that's the best thing ever, because then it's like, you know that what you're inventing, it's not, once there's people believe in it, it's not a problem anymore of the execution, as long as the team put together to creatively execute at the early stages can thug it out through the trial. That's it.
I think the hardest part really is, I don't know, I think it's, okay, question for the room and the panel. Anyone have ADD, ADHD?
Yeah.
I figured most people like that. So I think the struggle is focus.
Standard.
Like, how do you focus? Like, how do you like get so excited by all these things? And like naturally, if you're an entrepreneur and you're like finding these problems, you're like, oh, right? You're like so excited. You're like, find other problems. You want to solve all of them. If you find a lot of like entrepreneurial journeys, right? Like Lisa, like while you were talking, I was like, done all these different things that don't seem related at all. It's because you get so excited and you want to try out all this stuff. And so I do find that that's like the hardest thing for me in particular. And because naturally entrepreneurs also are very hardworking, they'll grind themselves while they're doing multiple things. And so just taking a step back and not just saying no, but also like structuring yourself, I think is really difficult, especially because all of us like went to traditional school. Well, I don't know, most of us went to traditional schools, right? You know how to do well. You know how to get an A. You know you have to study for the exam. You know you have to do that project. So structured, you get a freaking syllabus at the beginning, right? I think that's my biggest pet peeve of colleges. Like you're training us for the real world, but you're giving us a fucking syllabus. Like that's not gonna happen. And so you leave and you're so used to that syllabus and you're like, hey, who's got my syllabus? Like, where's that at? And things happen, right? You like, the tropes fill up. And so, yeah, just the struggle for focus is really, really, really hard. And it's something that I don't know, like how to fix. So I don't know the solution. Sorry, guys.
Not done yet. You can continue.
Yeah. But I think the best part, and I want to sound like a hypocrite with that, is also the best part is that like it's so exciting. You get to like learn all these new things, and like as somebody that loves like I love going to school. I love like learning different topics. Like when people ask, "What's your favorite subject?" I'm like all of them. I'm like I want to know all this stuff, even if I don't like it. I'm like it's so exciting. And those aha moments, right? I think that's like a drug.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a serious fucking in your head.
Yeah, you're like, wait, what's happening? Yeah, a million other things, but I think those are the top two coolest things.
Excellent. Thank you. So we're going to go. I have a more particular question, a series of more particular questions, and then we'll get done on this Q&A for individuals. So I think the first one, and Lisa, I'll talk to you about this, is bootstrapping versus raising capital. Now, for those of you guys that don't know, Lisa is a GP at a venture capital group, but I think all or most of your companies you bootstrapped. So you have a really interesting perspective on the bootstrap versus raised capital perspective. So if you could take a few minutes and just talk about, okay, one, define the difference real quickly, but also talk about it. What are the pros and cons? Like, if an entrepreneur was considering what kind of venture was he probably considered a bootstrap or raise capital, what considerations they need to think about?
So with bootstrapping as a founder, you are taking any profits from, or really the distributions that you would be paying yourself, and you're pumping it right back into the company. Maybe you had a round of angel investors who did not take equity. They maybe gave you some debt that you repaid back through the profits of the company, but you did not exchange any of your equity for money to help the company grow or scale. With taking an investment, particularly with venture, with the fund, it's called the Veteran Fund. We invest in entrepreneurs who are veterans of military spouses in tech and religious spaces. We take equity, right? A venture capital fund, and we love our entrepreneurs, we love supporting them. At the end of the day, a venture capital fund is a for-profit entity, which is out to make a return. And so they're going to be focused, and we are focused on investing in companies that where their founder is going to make some room on the cap table for not only themselves, but also us. And we need to make sure there's plenty of room because we're going to, at the pre-seed level, which is where we invest in, we want to make sure that you have plenty of room on that cap table for other investors that are going to be coming down the line as you grow and scale and start raising other series, right? So that's the biggest main difference between the two. And as a founder, you really have to decide for yourself, why am I doing this? Is this a company that I want to keep forever? Is this a fun lifestyle business that I want to keep for legacy and maybe have my family involved in it, like real estate, for example, right? Or is this a company that I want to grow and scale and I need money the way a rocket needs jet fuel because I have to scale as quickly as possible, get this product out there in as many hands and as many eyeballs on it as possible. And then really have an exit in mind. Is it 5 years from now? Are you going to sell it to a larger conglomerate? Are you going to take it public? What's the exit plan for your founders and for your investors? Because every investor is going to want to hear what that's.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. That's really important for you guys to consider is when you start to participate, you consider, okay, what's the trajectory of my venture, raising capital or bootstrapping, partnering with certain part of equity or retaining to myself and my prosperity or for your spouse, whatever. Thank you.
And also just one more thing, just know it's okay if you started bootstrapping and then later go raise. And actually, sometimes that's even better. So just know it's not like you have to pick one and that's the only thing you can ever do. But if you start with investors, you start with venture, you're pretty stuck. It's hard to claw back that equity.
Yeah, Lisa and I were talking before this, and that's a really good point, is that the moment you take a single dollar of venture capital, you are required to raise another round, almost without failure, you're required to raise another round because the investment model of venture capital is that you become a hyperscale, very valuable company, and then either sell or raise more round to retire your previous investors. So it's very much a viable model for startups in general, but you have to consider that when you give away $1 venture capital, you're raising another $1. That's the trap, and it's hard to claw back, as you said. There's pros and cons of both, but appreciate your insight. Faye, kind of on a similar note, and you and Lisa have been involved in the venture world. If a founder is thinking about raising capital, what do you think of the main? And this is such a loaded question. I get that there's so many parts. We get a whole session on it. But what do you think are the main things that a venture capitalist is going to look for in the venture team, et cetera, for a venture that's considering raising capital? And as best you can frame it so that entrepreneurs in the room can think about, okay, this is what investors will be thinking and wanting from me or see in my venture.
Yeah, okay, yeah, big question.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll start with some parameters. So in the context that I'm speaking in, it's startups that have decided they are venture scale, that they do want to grow at that lightning speed, and they have not raised money yet, and they're in the early stages. So this is the context in which I'm speaking about, because there's a lot of other situations we can talk about. So if you're at that stage where you're early, maybe you just launched, maybe you don't have any employees, you haven't raised any money, and you're thinking about going after venture capital funding, the simplest way that I can explain it is really in 2 bullet points. Well, the most important thing is you. They're investing in you. Sure, you got an idea, but every Joe Schmo on the street has an idea, right? And every idea can be great. But they're investing in you. They're investing in your ability to execute and also your ability to pivot. So they want to see that you're an expert in the field. They want to see that maybe you have the right education, right? If that's needed for that type of business. Maybe they want to see that you're motivational. Can you hire a team? I remember one of the things that I always had in my head when I was investing in companies is, would I work for this person? Do they motivate me? If you don't motivate me, then I don't think you're going to hire the best people, right? And so if you can't get that talent, how are you going to do it? And so you are the most important person, which I'll put a little caveat here and say, that's why a lot of times responses from venture capitalists are very frustrating. A lot of times they'll say, oh, you don't have enough traction. It's like, oh, you're a pre-seed investor. It says no traction around much. The thing is, it's really hard to give, a lot of venture capitalists won't give you that feedback. They won't tell you, hey, it's you. Right? They won't, because it's an uncomfortable situation. They don't know you. They also don't want to be wrong. And so it's a very sensitive, delicate matter. So when you're getting a lot of feedback that doesn't make sense or that you're not understanding, maybe if you get that feedback, reach back out and say, hey, I have thick skin. Give it to me straight. And founders have done that to me, and I'll write back and I'll say, listen, I see 10 companies a day, right? The last guy I talked to has 20 years of experience in the field. You have 0. Who am I going to invest in? I get it, the idea is great, but I don't have that conviction in you in this particular idea, in this particular industry. And so reach back out, ask for feedback. Some of them will give it to you, some of them won't. A lot of them have rules that they don't give out feedback, by the way. Because they're like, yeah, because they're like, we don't want a bad brand name. We don't want this company to go raise billions of dollars. And come back and say, Faye, I suck. And so just have that in the back of your mind that you're not always going to get the right feedback. You have to you have to have a little bit of EQ and understanding what they're saying and see how the conversation's going. I know it's hard with the team and stuff like that. So first thing is team, absolutely. You have to have the right team. If you don't have that expertise, you better find somebody that does. You better build a team around you that's strong. You better show them that you can hire the right people and have the right expertise. If not on your team, on your advisory, right? So that's number one. And then two, and almost more importantly, two is a venture scale. So I'll give a quick example. If you come to me and you say, I'm building an app for personal trainers and I'm charging $5 a month. The first thing I'm going to do while I'm on the Zoom with you is I'm going to Google how many personal trainers are there in the US. And I'll find out, I don't know, I'm really bad at math, so I shouldn't have done that. But let's say there's 100 and you're charging $5, right? So what's the maximum that you can make? Right. So why would I invest in that, right? That's not worth my time. So I'm looking for companies that can be unicorns. Now probably decacorns. I'm looking for like billions and billions of dollar exits. It's not going to be realistic if you're just selling to personal trainers. And so I know that's not the best way to look at it, but a lot of venture capitalists do that because again, they're looking at 10 companies a day. They need to quickly stream you out to get you to the next round. And so when you go to them, even if that is your beachhead, talk about the entire opportunity. Okay, I'm starting with personal trainers, but I'm expanding to all wellness facilities, spas, gyms, hotels, resorts. I'm starting with $5, but the idea is it's going to be a product that does all of these other things that I can charge $500 a month, right? Talk about the big vision because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for these entrepreneurs that are crazy, that are willing to take a bet, that are willing to struggle this much for billions and billions of dollars. And also, we don't want somebody to exit. We don't want somebody to lead next round, right? Because then we don't get the value of it. And venture capitalists are looking for 10x returns, right? And so show them 10x returns.
That's a really good point. I think that kind of harkens back to what we talked about bootstrapping versus raising is a lot of times how bootstrap versus raising is retaining equity. Like you have a great idea. You think you're already profitable, you have revenue profitable, etc. You can scale this and you can exit. A good example is Mailchimp exited bootstrap for $11 billion just last year. Whereas that's not usually the case, but when you typically have a venture scalable product and you want to go out and raise capital, you have something that's huge, it's a large market, it's hyper scalable. That's why VCs want to invest in it. When you're considering something that's more legacy, or maybe you don't want to exit it, say you want a real estate, or say you make a neat cup of coffee in a coffee shop. Or maybe a chain of coffee shops. You absolutely can, as a founder, raise and build a grind and make it a find that pays you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, 100 or even millions of dollars a year. It doesn't necessarily make it a venture backable, or for VCs anyway, a venture backable startup or business venture. Doesn't mean it can't be successful or highly predictable. You just have to think about the large market, the scalability of the venture. That's why you tell these ventures tend to be tech, because of the hyper scalability of that and the large market sizes. So again, it's not a question of mainstream business versus tech startup business. It's what is the fit, what is your intention, and what's the legacy model for your venture, and then you consider, okay, what is my capital or non-capital source of that? That's excellent. Thank you. Jamie, kind of the resident, I think that all the individuals here have some experience in growth hacking, but I want to get your insight. What can you define it? Because a lot of people are like growth hacking. I guess that's a term thrown around by a lot of entrepreneurs. So can you talk a little bit about, define what growth hacking is and get the best advice for our founders on how to do it. And I know the growth hacking it's a mode of figuring it out. So there's not a lot of set rules, but if you could go into that a little bit for us.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics, actually, because about 10 years ago, I sat under a guy named Vince Clancy from England, who introduced me to the concept of, and he was, I think, supporting Techstars at the time. And the idea of growth hacking is basically to using free methodologies, reach and grow your brand through social media. So I spent the last decade understanding what that looked like. And for startups specifically, when we are able to identify, this is where a lot of my work prior to becoming a founder was, when we're able to identify kind of our ideal clients and start to dig into where they live online, social media, and now in Web3 and the metaverse. Growth hacking is the term that basically means, how can I scale my customer base for very little to no money using tools that are already out there? And we started this about 10 years ago before we had AI chatbots, or whatever this new AI bot thing that I haven't used is. Please tell me more about this. But we were looking for massively scaled email addresses where we could find people online 10 years ago before they wanted to be found. But to grow a customer base, like say on Instagram, before everybody was using all the things for Instagram. So growth hacking to me is when a startup says, hey, we need to have exponential attention. And actually a really good example of this sitting in this room, Gabe, is with a Work BNB, a video shout out to you, because he's pretty much grown his brand. I'm looking at you right in the front row. An ideal of growth hacking is, how do I take my product into the consumer market for very little or no cost through social media, through my brand awareness, through who I am, through the messaging, the storytelling, what we're doing, through meeting our clients where they're at, understanding really where they are, and saying, hey, how do we 10x this? How do we create, not just I'm spamming you with a ton of information, but I'm giving the right customers exactly what they want. So they're coming back to the conversation and using that to get the traction, to get this is my favorite term recently, meat on the bone. Please explain to me what meat on the bone means. Someone after this session. So that's anyway, but so getting meat on the bone, as everyone says, and if you need that traction, how do you get eyeballs onto your whatever it is, website, what your product testing, whatever that is, traction. And so growth hacking is the way to do that for free, to look at how do we scale reaching these eyeballs, having these conversations, and we don't have a budget. We're doing it with me and my cousin or whatever, right? And so it's studying the, and I geek out about this for hours, but it's studying where people are online and how they're interacting with each other, and like finding those people and going, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. And not instead, it's the exact kind of opposite. It's like the pendulum swaying, like paying tons and tons for Google AdWords and SEO and this marketing group that tells you you're going to be doing it yourself. And as a startup founder, 10 years ago, everyone was growth hacking. We were all trying to do it because we're like, shoot, we got to get meat on the bone so an investor will look at it. I still don't know what that term means. Somebody, it's in the trough, isn't it? It's in the trough. Anyway, so it was a matter of like, how do we show that people are interested through either email signups or, Twitter accounts or whatever it was, to show investors that people were paying attention to us before we actually had a product to show.
Thanks so much.
For free.
And this one is for Marta and Lindsay, because we both got, both have it. Is you guys are in a highly regulated industry. And when you're innovating a highly regulated industry, I think that one of Lindsay was usually, just imagine going up and like banging your head against the wall repeatedly. Can you talk a little bit about what are the what kind of tips that you would recommend for entrepreneurs who are in a regulated industry, whether it's fintech is like probably the biggest, mostly regulated industry that people innovate in. Cannabis is a big area as well, or cannabis tech rather, et cetera. What are the general advice you would give to founders operating in a regulated industry? One of the things I'd like you to touch on is there's a space where you can just go out and learn it yourself, and you guys minimize that versus maybe getting a consultant, a board member, advisory, relying on the experience of others who have attorneys, rather in the experience or expertise in that said regulated industry. Very proposed way to ask the question.
Yeah. Well, so the cannabis industry has presented Lindsay and I's company and product and vision with a really unique opportunity, because it's so new, it's so onboarding, and it's so progressive. It's given the two of us a platform to talk to regulators about what we want to do with chain of custody. So the lockers we make for cannabis could be used for alcohol or for blood or oriented or anything that is more regulated that you can't just store it in a regular Amazon. The cannabis industry not only is it state by state and patchwork, so we have numerous examples of regulatory authorities that we can talk to, but also because it's a uniquely progressive space right now. Or in this moment, it really had so much latitude in getting to have these conversations. Like in Massachusetts, and then we had the benefit of COVID. So for us, we really, there was a lot of timing that aligned, but after COVID, chain of custody and having contact with pickup was important to everybody. In cannabis, it was deemed essential medicine, and so states had it, after they legalized, they had a mandated authority to serve their medical patients, even in shutdown. And so this created a nationwide place where regulators were looking for how to reduce the operational cost and be able to provide continual customer service ability in a way that they were able to say, oh, stuff for the global financial collapse of COVID. So, wow, okay. And we were, so to get inroads in a regulated space, we had to go around asking, hey, can we, a lot of feedback was this is over-engineered and unnecessary at this time in 2019, but then it was 2021. And so I would say we made careful inroads on how to talk about it, say and be like, know your state or know it, have a jurisdictional alliance that you can work with. That has been great. Cannabis Control Board here is great. They're responsible for a lot of new license types, including the lounge bill that's coming out here that is really progressive for the way the rest of the country can look at it. But then also we, early in our company, we granted a bit of equity graciously to develop an advisory board that would be able to support us where we didn't know what we didn't know. And that's where we got leading federal attorneys who had moved their careers into cannabis industry as it came about, and really tried to align ourselves with the most informed individuals in the space, not only from like, or definitely not from a grant perspective, more from a strategic perspective of how they were going to be able to inform their regulatory effects over the next 5 years. So we did that. Our advisory board, I'd say, was really, really helpful. But I think it's something, and sort of going back to what Faye said, is like, if you're going to look at a venture route, there's a lot of fun StartUpNV, Fund NV, 1864, great term sheets. There's a lot of incubators out there that will give you a very low percentage for what is actually not enough money to really take you anywhere. And so then you, as Logan mentioned, you're required to do this next round of funding, and the dilution is so we bootstrapped for a while. We put 100K of our own money in before we raised convertible loans for the fund, and that was important to get us to be leveraged in a way that we could still help business grow. Those advisory board shares that we originally gave out 1% to, I think, 8 advisory board members in the first 2 years. That turned out to be pretty gracious. And right now we don't even have a formal advisory board, but I would recommend, if you're going to look at a C Corp, then to probably give out 0.5% or 0.25% to advisory board members, because they're not really going to put in the execution work at all. Again, they're going to be like, person you can call is very important. Really, really great advice and sound, but they're not going to do any work. And so just remember that that's your advice group that you're giving away the companies ahead of time.
Yeah,
But it's very, very helpful if you need to get inroads with the regulators.
100%. Yeah, you pick them wisely. I think that's a great answer, a great question, because it sort of leads to like tactical ways that you can do things here. And regulated industry, whether it's posting these right here, Leslie, like Safe Harbor, people that are working in these regulated industries, whether it's pharmaceuticals, like yeah, you don't need any of that. We're in the advice. So Marta that did it, like she said, the way that we did it, we didn't have anybody, we were bootstrapped. So we literally got up, we Googled and we called, we found the number and we left messages and we waited on hold until strangely agency reps, like in cannabis it's state by state, like Marta said, so it's different for every state. So it's a complete like behemoth. That is nothing like California, which is nothing like Massachusetts, but they were strangely open to, not strangely, I guess, but they were open to, because that's their job, to educating people and helping. So you can work your way up in terms of government agencies, like at least in cannabis, a progressive, small, insular industry in which it's not that big and it's not that sort of formalized yet. We were able to work our way up simply through endurance, simply through diligence, simply through call again, they didn't answer, they didn't call back, and months of that. And then we eventually, in certain states got to the point where we were consulting with the head of the agency reps, and they changed the draft regulations to allow for contactless delivery of cannabis product, whereas before they had like outlawed that. So it feels like it takes forever, but then you finally get the right person on the phone. And so we did that generally. That was her and me, sitting in a room doing that. But then there's also a point where it's the networking of going to events like this, of, StartUpNV, other like Tech Alley, great sort of Las Vegas based or state based networking opportunities and events will put you in touch with some of those people, depending on your industry. Industry specific events will allow you to meet the state representative or a stakeholder, or probably a ton of lobbyists and like a lot of consultants, and they'll all try to get your business. But then you pick the right one. We've worked on one that saw us and was like, whoa, this is really weird and revolutionary. So this is when we were doing transport. I won't go into that whole thing, but he was basically like, I'll work with you guys for free for a while. And, he ended up having a ton of insight and input and power at the state level. And so it really just is a matter, I think, of both glad handing and shaking hands, and then also putting in the drag and slog of the hours of trying to work your way up through those regulatory spaces.
Just like because just as like pure advice, if you're going to be in a regulated space for us, it is so important to make those advances. Then definitely set up the network, align yourself with the best lobbyists you can, and if they want to maybe get as a consultant, don't give anybody too much equity because they're political brain to give you advice. I'm really happy with the lobbyists that we worked with as consultants, and there's no need to pay consultants either without a statement of work. So that was really important for us to learn too. There's statements of work that you can use, not just for engineering teams, but for consultants. And it's a great way to look at objectives and key results and how the relationship can be more bilaterally rewarding.
That's actually the next license. So bring to a non-time, non-statement of work bound. We digress. That's maybe that'll be one of the questions.
One of the scariest.
We are going to defer. I know that it's getting into our. We'll have a couple of questions from the audience, and then we'll there. But for now, and then I'll repeat those questions for those that are online, so you guys can pick up the audio. But get a couple of questions from the audience. Thank you.
First of all, I want to say all five of you are just absolutely incredible. You each have just amazing, unique personalities to start with, and it's very inspiring. So much of what each one of you has said so far has really resonated with me, and I'm sure it's been a good year. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Second of all, she doesn't know that I'm going to say this, but Faye, just so all of you know, I've hired her a number of times as a business consultant, and she's freaking amazing. So I have to keep her out from it. So she doesn't know how I think. She's incredible. So if you need a business advisor, she's your woman. Here's the question. Lisa, you said something earlier that resonated with me. I'm sure everybody about the wearing a million hats. A little over a year ago, I launched a streaming service, and I've been involved in reality television for a pretty long time. So now I'm kind of instead of being in front of the camera, I want to be behind the camera. So it's very reality TV based, my content. But so I've been doing it for about 14 months now. And like what you said, one thing that's been challenging is not only am I, coming up with concepts for all the content, but I'm also booking the guests, and then I'm filming it and I'm editing it and making sure everything sounds good, looks good. And then I'm doing social media and marketing, and then doing all the business stuff and the bookkeeping, and then making sure the business license and making sure, all of that, as you guys know. And, I'm so lucky because I have a very supportive husband. If it wasn't for him, I'd be like in the trough of sorrow moms. But I'm at a point like I would give away an organ to get a business partner, but it's a matter of I'm making ends meet every month, but just like I'm like a barely in black, and but it is going well. But my question is, when you have 1,000 things to do, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, which is a blessing and a curse, because then I spend so much time making sure everything is done exactly right that I probably spend more time on it than I need to. How do you prioritize when you feel like you're handling 85% of all your stuff great, and you feel like you're kind of dropping the ball on the 15%, which I'm constantly like beating myself up for that, so that's tough. So how do you prioritize, because something's gonna have to get not given as much attention. How do you prioritize that? And also, I'm not at a place with my revenue yet where I can bring on another person. But I'm looking into like outsourcing, like, you know, like I'm starting with like bookkeeping, like, you know, when do you go, I'm gonna bring somebody on, you know, full time, or when do you go, I'm gonna outsource that to like the third party company, like a marketing firm? Do I hire a marketing firm, or do I bring a marketing person on as like my staff? So sorry, that's a lot, but that's.
Generally, the question is, if you're still bootstrapping, not really enough to hire an individual staff, you're juggling a million different responsibilities. One, how do you prioritize those tasks? What is going to take priority? What can you let go by the wayside? But also, when do you kind of consider hiring professionals to do some of this work, like legal, finance, accounting, et cetera, things of that nature? So it's kind of two-part questions.
Sure. So the best way to prioritize is figure out what are the things that you're really good at. Everyone in the room has like 4 things that they're really good at, whether that's sales, whether that's the back end minutia bookkeeping, whether that's the marketing piece, whatever it is. There's 4 things that you know you're really, really good at. So I would make a list of those and then cross-reference that with your like giant to-do list. And then highlight absolutely the corollary ones that you're like 100%, I can do these all day. If editing is not something that you love and you're really, really good at, hire someone on Fiverr, right? Like get someone per project. But ultimately, I would be perhaps looking for someone who would be really good at whatever are the things that you're not good at or you don't like. So whether that's like editing backend stuff, financial bookkeeping, and there's tons of different, like for the longest time, we heard a company called Bench.co, and that we just do all of our outsourced bookkeeping for us. And then for the real estate brokerage, we finally ended up bringing someone in-house to do like all the QuickBooks stuff and commission, so that kind of stuff. And as you scale, you'll start to realize how much more of a need you have for it. But if it's something that's like editing, it sounds like that's something that's needed for every project that you're doing in the business, right? So I would figure out if there's a way if you can have that outsourced first per project, and then ultimately end up partnering with someone who's able to take that on, and they just love it. They love editing.
Can I add on to that just briefly? I've hired talent, both creative and engineering, for the last 10 years, but I will say there's a lot, even in this community, of people who want to build a portfolio, who want to enter in, who want to collaborate, who want to have their work out there. So one of the things that I've seen additionally is there are people who are in graphic design and photography and whatever that is, who are like, how can I get more of my work out there? And over the last decade, people have come to me saying, how can I partner with people who, and I'm willing to donate my time even. So there might be even in the baby stage before you get to, there might be quite a few people that are willing to collaborate with you to have their work recognized, right, in a creative fashion.
And put what you're looking for in your LinkedIn bio. I've done it so many times. I'll put it in my LinkedIn bio of what we're looking for. I put it in my Twitter bio before of what we're looking for the company, and people just reach out to you.
Has anybody worked with college interns?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, done.
Yeah, so you know they have the little internship program. They have an entire internship program.
Okay.
Reach out to, I know a few more things. Reach out to the Office of Career Services, and then they have an entire process. You actually can find startups, founders, and brand yourself as a startup, because you'll attract a wider range of students, even as everything from engineering to graphic design. You'll attract students who want to get that experience. As for a shallow, it's not really shallow, for a small reason, but for a startup on their resume too, is they actually want the practical experience, they want to get engaged, they want to have that experience in their resume. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming out.